Okay, so we'll get started. This is the June CALS Comm workshop, and Michelle is going to be talking with us about science communication. Thanks so much, Michelle, for agreeing to, and this was a late ad. She was flexible and helped me out in a pinch. So many thanks. Michelle Jewell is the chief science communication writer for the Department of Applied Ecology, and she is an acclaimed photographer and writer also. And we thank her so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Janine. I'm just resetting my slides here, realizing that I was going to start from the end and not from the beginning. But while I set that up, not that way. Thank you again. It's a real pleasure. And can't do two things at once. Hold on. There we go. Okay, we're getting there, folks. We're getting there on a Thursday afternoon. That's it. Okay, so thanks again, Janine, and thank you all for being here for this chat. I'm delighted to be here. Absolutely love to talk about science communication with people at all stages of their communications careers. So as Janine mentioned, I'm at the Department of Applied Ecology as their chief science communicator. Along with that, I co-lecture a course every spring semester with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Catherine LaPrivo, called Applied Science Communication. So if you're at NC State, graduate student interested in these topics and you'd like to take that course, send me an email and we can chat about it. Those of you who know me, there's a few of you in the room who do. You know that I absolutely hate lecturing. I prefer to have a discussion. So I will have several prompts asking for your feedback during the talk or asking for your advice during the talk. I've broken this webinar down into about 3 take-home messages, and they're the following. 1, there's no such thing as a general audience. We're going to talk a little bit about that. It gets thrown around a lot. Number 2, therefore, there's no one message that the different audiences that you have. And 3, there are resources available to you either to help workshop your communications, conduct it for you, or get better trained, depending on which field that you're in. So I'm a zoologist by training. Specifically, I study how predators interact and influence the ecosystems that they exist in. And I found several parallels between that training and my science communication career. So I thought I'd start this presentation by giving you a few broad strokes views about how I look at outlets, publishing, media creation, and distribution within this ecological type of framework. So first, I need to get us all on the same page with some key terms I'm going to be using during the talk. Nothing super advanced, but I will be taking some of you back to Bio 101. So let's go ahead and get started here. For the purposes of my talk here, I'm going to be talking about ecosystems as complex environments with rules where something exists, right? Pretty basic. If something's adaptive, that means it's a trait that makes it more likely to survive. If something is maladaptive, that means it has a trait that means it's more likely to die. And if there's selection or something is selected, it means that a trait is kind of doing the most in the ecosystem, leading to either way more of that trait or way less of that trait. And usually that means there's going to be new rules to the ecosystem as well. First, just to get us all on the same page using our new vocabulary for some of us, I'd like to take a look at one of my favorite predators, and I'm going to ask you in the chat for a little bit of feedback. So let's have a look here. Pretty familiar face for some of you, but take a look at the features of this animal, and just in the chat, just start listing some things that you think make it more adaptive, that help this animal survive in its ecosystem. What about it? Sharp teeth, absolutely. We have sharp teeth that helps us grip onto prey. The color, we have counter shading, where you're dark on top, light on the bottom. That means that you're an animal that hunts both at the surface and at depths. Streamlined body shape, you want to be able to be quick in the water. Sensor, yeah, they have electric senses, incredibly strong. Rebecca, they are one of the fastest animals in the ocean, thanks to this piston system that works their tail. You can see it working back and forth like that now. Yep, the tail is horizontal, definitely. That helps speed along us mammals. They're stuck going up and down, which is a little bit not so great, but perfect. You guys see where I'm going with this. We have traits about this animal that take advantage of the rules within that ecosystem, right? Some of the rules are water, hydrodynamics, visual cues, coloration, etc. Let's do another one of my favorite predators too. Ooh, go forward. A little bit of a different looking guy. But tell me, with our sunfish here, what traits do you see probably help this animal survive in his ecosystem? And I swear this loops back to science communication. Just stay in the deep end with me a little bit longer. We've got a bony fish, not cartilaginous. Absolutely stronger structure that helps it at depth. What else? Yes, it's incredibly flat, really get huge eyes, very, almost 360 view around. Really huge paddle fins, also with stability, because this guy's hunting slower prey. It's more interested in jellyfish, whereas our shark is more interested in seals, dolphins, etc. So we have two creatures existing in similar habitats. And overall, their goals are basically the same, right? To survive, to find prey. But the formats that they're taking are very, very different. And that's because they have very different goals, right? One is to catch seals, one is to catch jellyfish. Traits about one would be maladaptive for the other. You're never going to catch a fast moving seal looking like a jellyfish or a sunfish, but you're also never going to survive off of just a diet of jellyfish if you have the warm-blooded hydrothermia of a white shark. So again, existing in the same system, but just taking on very different formats. And we see this in communications a lot. And even when animals are not related to each other, but they're in the same system, they can then come up with the same shape too, right? This is a version of convergent evolution. You have sharks and dolphins, which are basically the same shape, but they are completely unrelated. One is a mammal that's come from land that still has hip bones. The other one is a fish that's been existing in the ocean since before trees have ever existed. But they are bound by the same rules. In the world of communications, platforms are ecosystems, and each one of these platforms has its own set of rules. And the way that we go about communicating is dictated by those rules. Some things are more adaptive for some platforms, meaning that they're more selected for, like images or videos, and other things are unselected for, just don't work very well. And that's examples like some messaging and some writing. Now we have some rules within communications that traverse all platforms, and they're just canon, right? Like this really simple graphics explainer. This is just the way that human eyes go over a page. It's just how it is. And even though you're all highly educated folks, and you're now very familiar with this rule, you are still going to lose the chicken game. You all did. Just admit that it happened, right? Again, it's just canon. This is just how our eyes rule over pages. And along with those canonical rules, we also have very quickly adapting rules. And these ecosystems can be changing all of the time. For example, we now sit at the first time ever in human history when language is changing and evolving without geographical boundary, because we can now instantaneously communicate in the borderless world of the internet. So if you're really interested in behavior and communications, I highly recommend Gretchen McCulloch's book, Because Internet. It's just a fantastic read about how this type of ecosystem is so rapidly changing and how much our lexicon changes even in the space of a month. Now, each rule in and of itself is communication specific 1 hour lecture or course. I mean, graphic design is its own course. Formulating messaging is a 3-day course through Compass. And since there's kind of a motley crew of us today in this webinar, I don't want to dig into specifics on each role of each platform, but rather I want to give you more of a process of how we work through communications challenges. And I want to address some of the most common questions that I receive as a communicator, and also some of the questions that I received within your form as well. So one of the most common questions that I get by students, scientists, community members, etc., is where should I post this? Janine, probably familiar question that you get as well. And really this question is asking, which ecosystem should I choose for my science communication? And my questions usually in response are, what traits does it have and what are your goals? I'm going to start with a project. So say for your case, if you think of this as a hypothetical for yourself, you have a project that's already formed and you're now at the stage of wanting to communicate it. I'm starting here because I feel like that might be more familiar for most of you, especially for the graduate students in the audience. So I'm going to pull from a recent example in applied ecology with a study that had to do with white-tailed deer. And here are some of its traits, and I'm going to break down the audience in just a second. For one, the study is tagging deer in urban and suburban landscapes. So we know that it is incredibly public facing. Immediately as a communications professional, public facing work means we need to have some sort of social platform, somewhere where people can interact directly with the researchers and the research animals that they might be seeing in their backyards. But which one? There's many social media platforms out there. Which one? And again, that might shock some people too. Oftentimes I have scientists that think, put it on every social media platform. No, we're going to focus our energies on one, maybe two. So, okay, we know it's public facing, but what are some of the other traits? We have a high quality bank of video and images, but from sending photographers out, sending myself out, which means, again, that's a really adaptive trait for social media. Again, we're pointing in that direction. If we didn't have these high quality images, yeah, Instagram is another really good one, Simone. If we didn't have high quality images or video, we would not necessarily want to pursue social media because we would just languish. We would be a sunfish trying to catch a seal. It just wouldn't work. And the third trait here, which is very important, is we have a collaborative team of researchers and a very dedicated graduate student who's interested in communications. And that's really important because very good communications campaigns involve a lot of effort and a lot of work. They're definitely not one and done. So that also points us towards social media. But again, the question comes back to which one? So working with the researchers, we identified 3 target audiences. First being landowners, because in these areas, we're working with volunteers who have said, you can use my property to set up a trap so that you can catch deer. So landowners are important to talk to because 1, they're probably going to see the deer the most, and 2, we need volunteers. Second, really important audience member are hunters, because we have kind of a counterintuitive message here. These deer are going to be walking around with tags, colors, lots of jewelry basically on them, but we want hunters to still harvest them. That's a really important aspect to understanding their population ecology. So we need to start with that messaging now, way before hunting season starts in the fall, so people know that these deer are still harvestable and they should be harvested. And then third, our always audience as university communicators are prospective students. That's our business. We want students to know what type of research experiences they can get, and the hopes that that might attract students who are also interested in these fields. But who these people are, landowners, hunters, prospective students, specifically what their demographics are, is going to inform us which social media ecosystem we should choose. And the data here are really easily accessible. Let me walk you through a little bit of it. First off, hunters are one of the most studied populations of humans, I think, on the planet. North Carolina Deer Hunting and Management Survey in 2016 told us that the average hunter in North Carolina is 51-year-old white male. Census data will tell you that the average homeowner in the United States is a white 56-year-old. So again, we have a pretty good overlap between hunters and landowners, which makes our job a little bit easier. And my question then is, for you in the chat, if you're trying to target this demographic, which social media platform do you think that demographic is using? 50s, white, several retired people, often are homeowners as well. We got Facebook, yeah. Facebook all day long, absolutely Facebook. And just to confirm that with some Pew Research data from last year in April, again, if you take a look at who are the ratios of people using, they just use 3 platforms, which I wish they would expand it out a little bit more, but okay. Again, we see in that 50 to 64-year-old range, Facebook 73%, Instagram 29%, LinkedIn 33%. You can see the differences here in age. So absolutely, Facebook was our one and good platform to invest the most energy in. And we're seeing the payoff of that already. On the right-hand side, we have a post that was posted to the Triangle Urban Deer Study from a landowner that says they saw deer 36 and 34 today. And that's brilliant, right? We have instant communication from stakeholders, interested public, and it really helps contribute directly to the study in and of itself. We know where these deer were on March 24th. Brilliant. So how about our last member of the audience though? Prospective students. And I'll give you a hint. If you take a look at the video that I have here, check out the orientation of how we filmed it. Which social media platform do you think we're going to target for the students? And you can throw it in the chat, your guesses. I saw one already. Instagram, yeah, there we go. Yeah, we got it's TikTok. Guys, it's TikTok all day long. I see, Suman, you're saying LinkedIn. LinkedIn is really, really good for more hyperlink focused or like application focused or opportunity focused. Video, LinkedIn's not so great with video yet, it's getting there. But for me, especially working in a department that is very hands-on in natural sciences, it's going to be TikTok all day long, and we're still developing our TikTok channel. But yeah, the demographic of the students that we're looking for, high schoolers and graduate students, they are on TikTok, and now millennials are creeping into TikTok as well. So here's a good example of how the traits of the research, right? Public facing, high quality video, dedicated graduate student who's willing to coordinate this, points us to the ecosystem type, which we knew we had to be on a social media. And then the demographics of that audience told us which platforms to choose or just platform to choose. We had our hunters and landowners, and mostly on Facebook. Our students are on TikTok. We also created a pamphlet of information with the most commonly asked questions, because the researchers also found a need that they were getting questions in the field while they were either waiting for deer or while they were working up deer. And this became a really good, handy medium for them to just be able to give this to people instead of answering the same questions over and over and over again, and also give somebody something to walk away with and learn a little bit more about. Personally, again, working in an ecology department, I really hate printing stuff. Don't like adding to a lot of print media that's out there, but in this case, it was really a useful tool for us to use. Again, not our first choice, but definitely found one that we found a good need for. Okay, so now for your reward for going through this, I just want to play for you guys what it sounds like when a deer is snoring. This is our sedated white-tailed deer giving us a few snores. I just thought it was very, very cute. Excellent. And she's been tagged, collared, ear tagged, COVID tested, blood tested, genetics, internal tag, diet sampled, etc. A whole lot of information coming from these deer already. And lastly, when it comes to this deer project, at least, you'll notice that we just chose 3 audiences and 3 audiences only. And this is because, and I can't state it enough, I have one career goal in mind here, that if I can contribute to anything, it's this. I need people to stop using the term general audiences. They just do not exist. They never have, they never will. And it's important to do the homework and identify who your priority audiences actually are. And this is where I often see science communication campaigns fizzle out, because oftentimes scientists, again, acting in a way that makes a lot of sense generally are trying to go a mile wide and an inch deep instead of focusing their limited energy on the audiences that at that moment in time are the most important and are the priority. Again, you've got limited energy, focus on where it can count the most. Here's a really familiar example of what I'm talking about. And this comes from, again, the marketing world. We have 3 identical cars, identical. So this is the same model, right, of our Subaru. But we have 3 completely different messages who are targeting 3 specific audiences, and not only those audiences, but they're targeting the values of that audience. So we have Skip the Weather Report, right? The sporty Subaru up in the mountains of the snow. We've got a Dear Subaru ad of the screaming child during a road trip. Again, really captivating photo. And then a very strong values message relating to pride. Again, happy Pride for this month. And here again, we can see, even though that Subaru, right, has a multi-million-dollar marketing team with nearly unlimited resources, they don't do a general audience campaign. They're very specific on who they target, and they target their top demographics. They don't try and go a mile wide and an inch deep. And again, notice the ecosystem that we're working with here. This is all print media. We have adaptive traits of high quality and compelling images. The blur of the first one indicating the speed. The second one, I think we've all been there with a toddler somewhere in the back of a car. And then our happy Pride as well. Really good design, really good images. And again, once you have those prioritized audiences in mind, that's where you can link to their values. And that's when you can have a really good impact. Great message plus their values leads to that impact. If you have really great message that has nothing to do with an audience values, you're not going to have impact. If you have really great values, but your messaging is not great, again, you're not going to have that impact. These work together extremely well, and each one of these requires its own set of homework. Linking that back to our deer, again, we did a similar thing. We had 3 different audiences, 3 very different messages, but the exact same project in a similar way that Subaru does. We had harvesting and population science for our hunters. We have use of properties and contributing to science and seeking volunteers for our homeowners. And then we have our research experience for prospective students or graduate students. So this example detailed when a project is ready. But another question that I often receive, particularly from early career scientists and graduate students, is about their own personal science communication endeavors. And maybe they don't have a project ready, but they just want to start doing science communication. And again, I get the question, which is very similar from the last. If I can get it, my guide to go forward. So where should I start? I'm passionate about science communication, but there's so much everywhere. There's so many platforms. Where do I even begin? And again, the question is kind of the same, which is which ecosystem should I choose for my science communication? And again, my question back is, what traits does it have? And what are your goals? But also I'll ask you to think about, while you're deciding to begin your science communication journey, I'll ask you to think about, where are you already participating? What are you already enjoying to do? If you enjoy reading, then chances are pretty high that you should stick to writing. And you can publish on a blog, either of your own or outlets associated with your institution. And once you're comfortable with that, you can start pitching stories out on a freelance basis. If you're a reader, you're probably a writer. If you're a writer, you're probably a reader. Likewise, if you're an artist already, then use art to communicate about your research. And there again, you can focus on those outlets that we talked about before that use images, high quality images, and the process, the video that you could create about making your art. That would be a social media platform, an Instagram, a TikTok. Likewise, if you're an emo punk band, you might want to reconsider that decision. But if you're really passionate about it, stick to it. By all means, use your music to communicate about science, and then stick to audio-rich platforms and social media. Let me back up. I think this is important advice because learning science communication is already a really difficult skill, but incredibly rewarding. So you don't want to add another complicating skill to it, like If you don't already edit videos or aren't interested in editing videos, don't try and cram that skill into science communication too. If you're not already an artist or don't know how to draw yet, don't try and do that and science communication. Stick to something that's already comfortable and fun. And then you can start to branch out. Look at it as a process, not having to do everything all at once. And then you can keep to that one ecosystem based on that adaptive trait that your creativity already contains. If you try and stretch, and oftentimes I've seen it where people try and stretch and do things that they're not necessarily comfortable with, that's often the folks I see that end up burning out when it comes to science communication as well. It's just too much to take on at the same time. So how would you go about learning science communication? If you're at NC State, you have tons of resources. There are programs, there are courses, there are classes for students. Faculty and staff can take these classes as well, and I highly recommend it. You also have communication staff. Many departments have communication staff. Colleges all have communication staff. The university has communication staff. And there's not an email that we love getting more than an email that says, I have an idea for a communications thing. Please help me. Yes. Or, oh, I've got this blog I want to publish somewhere. Oh my God, yes, please, I'll take it. Let's find some pictures and put it together. We're never going to say no to that kind of thing. But it does come with a caveat that can be really difficult sometimes as a communication professional, that not everything in the academic world that is very great and very CV worthy is necessarily newsworthy. And that can be kind of a sticking point sometime. So I want to put that caveat out there because I don't want you to feel dismayed if you come to your communications professional and you say, I have this really great thing from my field that's so specific to this. And we go, that is so great, congratulations, but I can't make a press release about it. Don't be dismayed by that. There are several really handy ways of figuring out what's newsworthy and what's not. On the right-hand side here, I've put the graphic that the AGU puts out to help researchers understand what's worth pitching to communications folks and what maybe is great for their industry, but maybe isn't for a broader distribution. Feel free to take a screen grab of that. It's from the AGU. If you look up AGU Sharing Science, it's on there as well. So don't be dismayed by that, but do reach out to the people you have close to you. We are always excited about it. The second thing is professional organizations. And this is something that I think we're going to see a resurgence of now that we're going back into in-person conferences. If your professional society has a conference coming up and they don't include SciComm training, request it. You pay dues for these societies and for these organizations. They will absolutely put together something if they see that there's a demand for it. And I think that's a really useful place to learn these skills because they can be tailored towards your specific field, whether that's a natural science, a physics, a mathematics, etc. Each one of those has its own niche, own ecosystems that they thrive in. So again, reach out to your professional organizations and ask for that type of training too. And then outside of these two really big buckets, within the triangle itself, there's Comm for graduate students. There's the Science Communicators of North Carolina. I'm totally biased because I'm a member that has training resources. Just take a look for science communication in the triangle and you will find quite a bit of it. We're really, really lucky in the triangle because there is such a huge amount of science communicators here. It's not the same everywhere. I think the other places similar to us are the DC area and the Pacific Northwest, and that's basically it. So take advantage of those two. Request this type of training as well. Now, before I open up the floor, we got tons of time. Before I open up the floor to some of your questions, again, I kind of give a really vague intro on purpose because I wanted to be able to dig into your specific questions. There were a few in the forms when you submitted for your registration that people put in that I just wanted to address really quickly. One of them asked about narrative. How do you build a narrative? And this is in itself, again, a great question that is its own 3-day course. For me, I like to, again, go back to English 101 in college, and I teach the Shakespearean 5-plot structure. But we do it a little bit differently. In Shakespearean 5-plot structure, there's a slow build, there's a climax, falling action, resolution. You probably recognize this from English 101. Somewhere back in your brain, it's clicking on. But for the purposes of kind of the modern audience, you can't start with the slow burn. You want to start at the climax. For most of us in research, the climax is the result. Here's what we found, or here's the importance of this, right in the middle of the action. And then once you describe that result, then you can go back to the beginning and fill in with that background information. This is also related to another question that I saw on the forum, which is how do you get people engaged in the first few seconds of a video or a story? Exactly this. Start in the middle of the action. What's the result? And then come back and build it up. Another tip that I give people is to think about who are your antagonists and who is the protagonist in your story. And when I say who, I rarely mean the researcher. Usually we're talking about aspects of the research itself. So maybe the antagonist is climate change. Maybe the antagonist, the enemy, is sea level rise, fires, increased fire danger. The protagonist could be the butterfly. The protagonist could be the microbe in the sourdough starter. It could be the new method that was used to understand this. That can be your hero as well. And then with those heroes and enemies, you can then build this narrative to go along with it. It sounds a little bit hard when you think about it this way, like as a rule, you know, but actually this is how we communicate regularly all the time. I'll give you a really good example. Sorry for everybody who might be afraid of snakes in the audience, but say you went one evening to go take the trash out and you saw this in your shoe. I'm going to ask you in the chat now, how would you communicate? What is the first thing you would say when you saw this happen in your sandal? If you were telling the story back to somebody, what's the first thing you would say? Yeah. Oh, Valerie, me too. Erin, same. Right, Jean, there's a snake in my house. Like, that's the result, that we have a snake in the house. Not only a snake in the house, there's a snake in my shoe. Like that, yeah, that is the result. And then you might go back and fill in some information. Like, there was a snake in my shoe last night. I figured out it was a rat snake. Did you know that rat snakes are one of 13 species of snake in North Carolina? They can get up to 7 feet long. Then you would backfill this kind of intro information, but you'd start with the action. Snake in my shoe when I was trying to take the trash out last night. So again, just use those same conversational skills. And usually you're not going wrong. That's how you would be the best way to communicate the science. One of the problems that we get in the academic setting, and one is not better than the other, let me just quickly say, in the academic setting, we have a very slow burn to get to our results. Right? If you think about any publication, the results is like 3/4 of the way down. We have all this information beforehand. When it comes to science communication, we start with the results and then we fill in everything afterwards. So it's a little upside down triangle situation, but a more familiar way of communicating. And with that, we've got loads of time, folks. With that, I can take some of your really specific questions. If you had specific questions about the projects as well, or more generally about life, we can go ahead and talk about that too. But just as a broad strokes introduction to how I think about science communication. And if you have any questions that you think about afterwards, by all means, email me. I love to get an email and I love to chat about these things outside of the Zoom world too. So I'll pause there for any of your questions.
Michelle, I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, the triangle urban deer study, you know, somebody brought up, I think in the, a question about like local, you know, advertising on local public TV or something, like, especially related to communicating science. How do you go about figuring out where you will find or how to best share information with an audience that's not necessarily on social media?
Yeah. So we start And again, if you think about communications as a journey, right? So in the beginning, we're social media focused. This summer, we are going to be reaching out to local news. These pamphlets that we've developed are going to work with our partners at museums to also help us be a point of distribution for some of this information, to cast a bit more of a broad net, but using the types of media that we already have instead of trying to stretch ourselves a little bit too thin, trying to create something specific for everybody. So that's part of that journey that we see in the distance, but trying to do everything all at once, I think, is where we get overloaded and overwhelmed too quickly. But yeah, so again, working with local news folks, that's where, again, reach out to college communicators, university communicators, have those connections. You can work with them because they know who are the best people to reach out to, and can help convey that story the best. And then again, once that momentum starts to roll, that's usually when you see newspapers pick things up, and then go from there too. But yeah, it's important to think about it as something through time that you're going to target different audiences during different phases. Like one of our big ramping up things that we're having now is that hunting season is quickly approaching in the fall. So we're going to have a huge push for hunters to know that they can still harvest these deer. And that's going to be its own strategic campaign with hunting associations, with places where we know people buy ammo, like Walmart, et cetera, to have this information locally so that people know that these deer can be harvested. So think about it through time. Yeah, Suman.
Hi, Michelle, thank you so much. So I really like the concept when you said that you want to reach out to prospective students through TikTok, because a lot of millennials, Gen Zs, and these people are moving to TikTok-based platform, that kind of platform from traditional Facebook or Twitter, whatever. Now the thing is, on TikTok, most of these videos, small videos, clips are like 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and
Yeah.
starts with a bang.
Yep.
And throughout that 10-second, 15-second video, it keeps your attention captured for the entire duration. The video you had showed us where that deer is lying on the ground and someone is trying to put a collar on the animal. Especially, do you think like that kind of video is going to, because it does not have that kick within 1 second or 2 seconds, it's going to appeal to the audience based on TikTok?
Yeah, no. So that's a really nice video to have as B-roll. So while I'm out in the field filming, I have my priorities set on making sure that I get the experiences of the researchers and showing them at work, but also capturing lots of B-roll to fill in with interviews or background information. So that video on its own would not be adaptive on its own in a TikTok setting, but incorporating that video into that 15 seconds somewhere, starting with a bang, starting with capturing the deer, then filling in with some of the other footage we have would be much more successful.
I see. And I have a follow-up question regarding how you are gonna put up this video on TikTok. Are you gonna do an ad on TikTok, or are you gonna just put up a video from a handle, maybe a university or a departmental TikTok handle?
Yeah.
How are...
Yeah, so we have a departmental TikTok account. And then usually we share these things out as well across to the NC State University accounts, to CALS accounts as well. So there's really nice sharing involved within the different departments and colleges and units. There was a second part to your question that I was going to get to as well. Yeah, so there's a little bit further distribution there, but also looking at TikTok as not necessarily just a place for one video to have a huge impact, but for a catalog of videos to show the kind of full experience that's happening at the department. So one video might be of the deer, next video might be of the striped bass aquaculture, next video might be about crabs and climate change, so that when a student lands on the profile itself, they can go back in history and see, oh, wow, like there's actually a lot of different types of projects that we could be working on.
That's right. The only thing with TikTok is like, how, I mean, I watch science videos on TikTok all the time, especially those cool chemical experiments experiments and stuff like that. Yet I miss a large chunk of university handles or individuals who put science and scientific stuff on TikTok. There, because the way the TikTok algorithm works, it is highly focused the kind of videos you are watching.
Mm-hmm.
So like putting these kinds of educational videos and stuff when it comes to appealing to a broader generation, to an entire generation, uh, is it going to have a great impact, like at the end of the day?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Suman. And I think the reason that you're not seeing a lot of folks on it yet is because not only it being relatively new, but the rules about TikTok keep changing too, which allows more and more people to use it. For example, federal systems can't use TikTok. So you probably won't see a USGS or a US Fish and Wildlife Service on it yet because they're waiting for privacy rules to change, which is its own, thing happening in the background. I have the benefit working in the Applied Ecology department where a video like the deer one can reach hunters, a video like the striped bass one can reach people interested in fishing. A video about the crabs is more interesting to people with climate change. So just by the nature of the research that's happening in the department, it casts more of a kind of wide net to reach a whole lot of different topics within the outdoors world. So I try and look at it as trying to tag into conversations that are relevant to people who are outdoorsy generally, that are interested in ecology generally, but then can also utilize those types of tags that are specific to those audiences, hunters, fishermen, people interested in climate change, etc.
Optimization.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Suman. I appreciate it. Yeah.
We've had two things come up in the chat, Michelle. One was a request for a link to the pamphlet.
Ooh, do I have a link to it? I'm not sure if it lives online yet, but Mary, I'm screenshotting you and I'll send it to you. And then Max, what does Max have to say? Research students themselves are often implicitly, sometimes explicitly desensitized, discouraged from participating in science communication, the academic institution to work in. Yes, yes. How might we as individuals help advocate for that change? Thank you, Max, for that question. This was also a question I received in the form. And what we're referencing here is an idea in the science communication realm that's been talked about for a long time called the Carl Sagan effect, which is when Carl Sagan, some of you may know, maybe several of you don't, depending on your age range in the webinar. Carl Sagan was a very famous science communicator, Cosmos, etc. And as Carl Sagan became more and more popular in the popular science realm, he was viewed less and less influential in the academic realm because people who were considered popular in popular science were considered not great researchers in the academic spheres. This has happened to several science communicators throughout time. Bill Nye is a very good example of it. The list goes on. That change is coming though. I have personally seen this shift in the conversation in the past 10 years. And I think this has to do more with how the impact of science is being evaluated largely from people who are giving grants. NSF asks a lot about engagement. There are more fields in grants who want to show how your research is going to be impacting the communities that you hope it to. And suddenly, people are seeing the huge benefit in science communication, not only communicating it, but having a really effective way of evaluating it. So I think some of the things that we can ask for, or some of the things that we can advocate for are, again, those professional societies to have that type of training. I personally, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I personally think that science communication should be required for anybody in the sciences. Any STEM field should be required to take science communication classes. And we're starting to see a shift in the types of products that science communicators use, where we're trying to put that currency into those products. So things like incorporating a DOI into a blog post or having a DOI into a YouTube link helps give that academic currency to more science communication products, which encourages more researchers to not only participate in it, but to see it in a more positive light. But like always, it takes time. It's easy for me to say it's not something to be discouraged about, but something to be part of the change that we want to see in the world, right? But thanks for that question, which I hope I answered. Any other thoughts? Any specific questions to your specific lab or communications challenge you might be hitting?
Michelle, in your experience, what are some like low-hanging fruit with trying to get new, if you're new to science writing, and you're just like, where's a good place to start sharing your information or your stories?
Yeah. And again, I'll answer this kind of from a natural sciences, ecology background, but I think this applies to all STEM fields. Within your research, you will have evergreen type information. And what I mean by evergreen is that this is a story that comes up every year, or it's a topic that is regularly in the public space, right? So a good example of this is years and years and years ago, we wrote a piece about big bees, right? Carpenter bees. And every spring, we all see the carpenter bees come out and they're buzzing everywhere. And they have this incredible life cycle that, again, in the spring, people really tap into. So we wrote this evergreen post about carpenter bees and their life cycle. And it's very basic. It doesn't dig in too much. It doesn't go too deep into, environmental triggers or anything like that. It's just, this is the life cycle of a carpenter bee. This is when we start to see them. And in the fall, you're going to see them again, because that's actually the third generation of bees during the summer. Isn't that cool? This blog post that we wrote 3 years ago, still every spring is my #1 post. It always comes back up because this is a search term that people are looking for. And that's kind of a rare case of a set it and forget it. We wrote this one post that has this constant evergreen nature about it. It always comes up in conversation. So I encourage you to sit back and go, okay, what are the questions about my field generally that we always get? Is it that there's always something to write about precipitation, heavy precipitation? It happens every year where we're going to have a storm that drops 10 inches of rain onto us. Is there a case where we can always write about something to do with drought? What about drought in North Carolina? Is there something really specific in chemistry that comes up all of the time? Is there something really specific in physics that, something about a black hole is going to happen in the news eventually? So can we write something that's really evergreen about black holes? I think that's a really fun way of not only taking a new perspective on your field of study, but to try and write it for that different audience that has not as deep of a scientific understanding in your field as you have, but is still really important background information for people to start with, to then carry on their journey of understanding more about your field. So yeah, I encourage, look for the evergreen stuff. Writing about it is super fun and super simple. And then once you have it, again, email Janine and me. Like we love this stuff. And we will definitely publish it. Your institutes will definitely publish it. And it can have a life of its own for many years to come because of that evergreen nature.
And as a side pitch, I love to share all of this internally also through to all the members of the college, because first of all, a lot of the research that comes out of our colleges, I think, very interesting and applicable to regular life. Most Americans eat meat. It's good to know how, what's going on with animal science with large animals. It's interesting to know, fish farms, like how they've changed. Like there's so much within our college that's good to know. And then internally, I want to celebrate the work that researchers are doing within the college. And the best way to do that is to tell people that it's happening.
Yeah.
I think Meredith posted something in the chat.
Okay, USDA is always pushing us for more social media content. More problem I see is people using their own accounts rather than Department of CALS extension accounts. So stories don't always get picked up by federal communicators. Oh, that's really interesting. Huh. Yeah, and I think there's a few, few ways to think about it. I really like to encourage each member within the faculty to run their own lab social media. And why I like that is, again, to go back into the marketing world, if you think about, influencers, right? Like we're less likely to buy a product when the product maker is telling us how great it is. But when we have people who are influencers tell us how great a product is, we're much more likely to buy it because we trust that person over the brand. And I find this is the same when it comes to departmental stuff versus the faculty. So if, as a department, I'm talking about how great the department is, are you going to believe me? Probably not. But if you have 6 faculty members within my department talking about how great the department is within their own spheres, then that's the influencer effect, right? Like it gives more clout to the work that we're doing to have 6 independent voices say the same thing. So I can see both sides of it. And what I really like to do in my department is anytime anybody in the faculty posts something, I repost it or comment on it or engage with it in some way, so that it is still very much within the circle. And I know that there are challenges when it comes to how many accounts can you monitor at one time. And I really feel, having now worked with several federal communicators, I really do feel for the huge challenge that they have of trying to monitor everything happening across the entire nation when it comes to communication within their fields. But I do think it's a strong way of diversifying the message so that it can help point a lot of different audiences back to you, versus trying to have kind of one account, that rules them all. But thanks, Meredith. Yeah, that's good to hear. USDA is pushing for more social media stuff. That's good to know. I got some pictures I can send them. Any other specific questions, issues that you might be having personally, or the lab, or challenges?
Well, we wait to see if there's 1 or 2 more questions. Michelle, tell me about a time when you had like a awesome experience in the field, and then that translated to a really successful communication campaign.
Sure. Yeah. So in the Department of Applied Ecology, generally, the summertime is when everybody's doing field work. So summertime for me is a busy time because I'm going out into the field regularly. Because again, if we go back to the analogy of ecosystems and social media, having the most adaptive trait in social media is having really compelling images and video. I like to get that collected ahead of time. I don't even have a story yet for the bees or the cave work or the snake work yet, but I'm already going out to the field and collecting that media. And then once we have that media and the publication comes out, or a really amazing result, or something that's relevant within the news occurs that we can talk about from the department standpoint, we already have that media in the bag. So a really good example of that probably has to do with, again, to go back to bees, went out to the field a few times with Elsa Youngstead and her students, got these really great photos of her students in the field. Their research then came out in 2 different ways. There were 2 different publications, but we had tons of media to then send off. And I'll tell you this as well, another ecosystem that you're working within is pitching to journalists to let them know that you have a story that's coming out. If I pitch to a journalist just a news release, it's just words, it might get picked up if it's compelling. But if I have any news release that has very good pictures with it or very good video with it, I'm just increasing its odds that it's going to get picked up. So really good images are always going to help you out. And in that case, that's what happened. We had really good images to go along with these 2 different publications, and then they were distributed across a lot of different, again, general audience type popular science articles, but also specific like Entomology Today and et cetera picked it up as well, because it's super relevant to their audiences too. So again, I encourage people to don't wait for the story to then go get the media. Try to collect it while it's happening, get those field photos while it's occurring. your best science communication toolkit that you can have is a really good camera. Take that onto the field and get pictures of people and things together. And you're always going to end up with something that you can use later.
So when you say that, is does that mean that you know that they're already working on a journal article or something, and then you're like, okay, before it's ready, you know, it's picked up for sure, or it's published, I'm going to go ahead and do this like legwork. So if and when it's a go, or is it already set that it's going to be published?
So I have no idea if
Okay,
it's going to be published or not. And this works for me in a few ways, because whether or not a publication comes out of it and we write a press release about that research, I'm always going to detail student experiences in the field through social media, or write about students who have received awards or gone on to present at different workshops. And then I have those field photos to talk about that work too. So always, 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 if you can get out into the field and get pictures of students and faculty doing work out there, you're always going to use those pictures in the future.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. This was awesome. And thanks everybody for attending. We will, like Michelle said many times, please connect with us. We want to hear the stories. We want to be able to help you elevate the work that's going on within your unit. And there's always ways I think that more brains make better decisions. And so even if it's just bouncing an idea off, we welcome all of that. Next month is going to be, the topic is going to be SEO. And we will be talking about writing metadata, keywords, backlinks, and some standard search engine optimization best practices to improve your strategy. So take care. That is July 14th, I believe. Yes, July 14th.
Awesome. Thanks, Janine. Thanks, everybody. Feel free to email me.